Hey guys, tonight we slip into fur-lined boots, wrap ourselves in layers of itchy wool, and set out across the frostbitten tundra. Your breath curls in the icy air. Shaggy goat snorts behind you, its hooves crunching over packed snow. There's a crude leather satchel slung over your shoulder, and inside it, it's a bundle of runes, 2 salted fish, and a small wooden spoon. It's Viking mail day, and you are the postman. You probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know where in the world you are re-watching from and what time it is for you right now. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You pull open the wooden door of your longhouse, and the wind greets you like a slap with a cold fish. Welcome to morning in 10th century Scandinavia. The sun is more suggestion than fact, barely lighting the snowy hills around you. Your boots, made from stitched together sealskin and poor decisions, are already letting in moisture. This, unfortunately, is normal. Your job, though not glamorous, is vital. You're a Viking courier, tasked with carrying messages between farmsteads, longhouses, chieftains, and sometimes across fjords to distant trading posts. You don't wear a uniform. You wear what you have: a woolen tunic, heavy cloak, and a belt that has seen better days and possibly other owners. Today's dispatches are tied up with strips of walrus leather. Some are thin rune sticks carved with short, sharp marks that form words kind of like early Twitter, but with worse spelling and significantly fewer memes. Others are wrapped in bark, folded like origami scrolls that sometimes hide a poem, a trade order, or even love notes. You try not to read them, but honestly, who could resist a peek, especially the dramatic ones sealed in fish oil? The first letter is going to Eric the Black, who lives 3 icy hills over and frequently threatens to move south, but never does. The second, a delivery of poetry from one love-struck weaver to another, written in rhyming kennings and, you suspect, deeply coded insults. And the third, ... Well, the third is odd. It's heavier than it should be. It rattles. Someone has carved a tiny goat on the back. You sling the satchel on your shoulder and begin your march. Your breath puffs out as you trudge past the boundary stones of your village, following a trail marked mostly by footprints, mossy rocks, and your memory. There are no signs, no arrows, only the occasional carved tree trunk that tells you, turn left here unless trolls are watching. It's not comforting. You descend a slope, your boots slipping just slightly on ice-glazed rocks, and the world around you is startlingly quiet. Only the occasional raven overhead or the creak of snow-heavy branches breaks the stillness. Your fingers are already numb, but you're used to that, because Viking mail doesn't stop for weather. It doesn't stop for wolves. It doesn't even stop for Thursday feasts, though you really, really wish it did. Someone once tried to invent a mail holiday, but the goats went on strike, and the idea was quietly buried beneath snow and embarrassment. About halfway down the trail, you reach the meeting tree, a place where messengers often swap news or take shelter. No one's there today. It's just a pile of old tracks and a curious squirrel that looks like it's judging your life choices. You drop your satchel for a moment and sip water from your horn. Taste faintly of fermented berries and bad ideas. You check your cargo again? All 3 messages are still secure, though the poetic one now smells suspiciously of herring. You make a mental note to talk to the weaver about scented scrolls. As the sun crawls lazily above the horizon, you spot smoke in the distance. Eric's house. It's built into a hillside with a turf roof and walls made of stacked stone and stubbornness. You pick up the pace, hoping he's not in one of his I hate mail moods. Last time he answered the door with an axe. Not to threaten, just to chop kindling, but you tripped anyway. When you finally reach the porch, a dog the size of a small bear growls from behind the woodpile. You hold up the rune stick like a peace offering. The dog blinks unimpressed. Eventually, Eric emerges. Shirtless. Always shirtless. You hand him the stick, mutter your greeting, and back away before he can start complaining about frost in his ale again. One delivery down, 2 to go, and now comes the hill. It's a steep one, the one that people whisper about. The one where legend says a messenger once rolled down it, crashed into a sheep, and proposed to it by mistake. Sheep said no, probably. You begin to climb, digging your boots into the snow, gripping a frozen birch branch for balance. Your arms ache, your breath hitches, and at the top, a familiar figure waits. It's Bjorn, your rival. He carries a bigger satchel, a smug expression, and a goat twice the size of yours. He nods once, says something sarcastic about your choice of footwear, and vanishes down the opposite trail. You hate Bjorn. You love the competition. Historians still argue whether Viking couriers formed actual networks or if it was all informal. Favor swapping, but loaning and occasional punching. But the truth, as always, is probably somewhere in between. You descend the other side of the hill, the wind pushing against your face like a wet cloth. Your goat bleats from behind a snowdrift. You forgot to tie it again? It's fine, follows begrudgingly, because deep down Evan goats believe in the male. You slide down the rest of the hill with all the grace of a sack of potatoes tied to a sled. At the bottom, your knees buckle slightly, and your goat, who clearly had the better descent strategy by just trotting around the slope, gives you a look. Not a sympathetic one either. You brush snow off your tunic and check the satchel. Everything's still intact, though one corner of the bark scroll now has suspicious teeth marks. You glare at the goat. Goat chews its cud and looks away, suddenly interested in a rock. Its next leg of your journey takes you past the frozen creek known as Slippery Death, a name given by a local bard who once fell in and claimed he met an elf. The elf apparently said nothing, just stared. Maybe it was a fish. Historians still debate the details. You step carefully over the creek's glassy surface, boots slipping slightly on hidden ice. You'd use a walking stick, but the last one snapped in half when you leaned too hard during a dramatic sneeze. You missed that stick. You named it Jarl Pokey. As you walk, you pass a tree marked with carved runes, a crude Viking map. It depicts a deer, 2 dots, and what might be a goat upside down, or a warning. Hard to tell. Viking wayfinding isn't exactly cartography. Instead, it's a mashup of memory, gossip, and that rock that looks like a dragon's butt. Mail routes, such as they are, change with the seasons. In winter, everything is slower. The fjords freeze over. The mountain passes clog with snow, and even the birds start hitchhiking south. Still, the messages must move, because behind each delivery is a life. A deal, a promise, a warning, or a wedding that someone forgot to mention was happening tomorrow. You remember last year's emergency wedding scroll? You'd run 12 miles, lost both boots, and arrived at the wrong ceremony. The couple still thanks you for attending because apparently your dancing goat saved the reception. Not this goat, though. This goat is new. This goat is trouble. At midday, you stop for a moment beside a frozen stream and unpack a quick meal. Dried fish, a chunk of flatbread, and a sliver of smoked cheese. The goat tries to steal the cheese. You You flick its nose gently. It looks outraged, as if it has forgotten all prior cheese thefts. You remind it out loud. It walks off in a huff and immediately gets its horns stuck in a tree branch. You don't help right away. You're back against a birch tree. You nibble your bread and glance at the horizon. Somewhere beyond those ridges lies your next destination, a weaving village that always smells like damp wool and ambition. The path ahead forks, and both routes look equally uninviting. One snakes through a bog rumored to whisper secrets. The other skirts a cliff that occasionally collapses just to spite travelers. You choose the cliff. At least there the views are better and the bog owes you money. As you climb higher, the wind sharpens. It doesn't howl, it mutters. Like an old man complaining about soup. Wrap your cloak tighter and lean into the incline, your boots crunching into patches of dry snow. The goat follows, now unstuck and sulking. The sky above is a flat gray like unwashed linen stretched too tight. You wonder briefly if the gods ever get tired of clouds, or if they invented them just to play hide-and-seek with the sun. You pause near the top and spot something on the trail ahead. A splintered shield half buried in snow, not recent, not bloody, just ... forgotten. Probably dropped by a traveler or a warrior who decided it wasn't worth carrying anymore. You pick it up, feel the worn wood under your fingers, then set it gently by a tree. Someone might come looking. The goat, meanwhile, has found a patch of grass, dead and frozen, but still worth chewing on. You leave it to its culinary exploration and take a short detour toward a rock outcropping where an old waymarker stands one of those curious Viking guideposts shaped like a headless man. Scholars still argue whether these were meant to frighten trolls or just mark territory, but either way, they're unsettling. This one has moss growing from its neck stump, giving it the appearance of wearing a very unflattering scarf. You nod politely as you pass. The trail narrows now, hugging the cliffside with all the warmth of a disapproving ant. To your left, rock wall. To your right, a sharp drop into nothing but snow, mist, and distant pine trees that look suspiciously judgmental. You move slowly, sideways at times, the satchel bumping your hip, the goat moving with awkward grace. It's at this moment that the wind chooses to gust hard, lifting the edge of your cloak like a cape and nearly yanking you backwards. You catch yourself. The goat doesn't flinch. You hate that about him. Eventually the trail widens again and you breathe easier. Just ahead, the land dips into a gentle valley, your next checkpoint. Smoke curls from a longhouse chimney. You hear faint voices. The weaving village. You descend carefully. Muscles tired but heart steady. Another message soon to be delivered. Another tiny thread in this tangled web of Viking life. The people here might not remember your name, but they'll remember the mail, especially if the goat doesn't eat it first. The weaving village welcomes you with the smell of wet wool, boiling herbs, and the unmistakable stench of overused foot wraps. A pair of children dart past you, giggling, their tiny shoes slapping against the packed snow as they chase a chicken that clearly doesn't. Tea! Want to be part of whatever game they replaying? You adjust your satchel and approach the central longhouse. Its slanted roof blanketed with a layer of sod and sheep droppings. A weaver named Thora meets you at the door. She's already holding out a hand, likely hoping for the scented love scroll you carry. Dig through your pack, pausing to untangle it from a piece of goat fur and what may be a fish scale. Here, you say, offering the bar-crapped note like a bouquet. She snatches it quickly and disappears inside without a word. Typical. The goat, emboldened by this moment of human distraction, promptly charges toward a hanging tapestry. You intercept it, barely grabbing its collar before it chews through 2 weeks of someone's labor. It huffs and snorts. You mutter an apology to the goat for not letting it eat priceless artwork. It doesn't forgive you. You lean against a post and take a breath. The world here is quieter, softer somehow. The wind is muted by the ring of hills, and the snow falls more gently like it knows it's interrupting a good nap. Women shuffle in and out of buildings, arms full of dyed cloth and wooden weaving tools, their faces flushed from the heat of indoor fires. One elderly weaver pauses beside you and asks if you've brought the goat poetry. You blink. She clarifies. Her cousin sent her a saga last year that was supposedly written by a goat named Gudrun. You nod solemnly and explain that this goat is not literate. She looks disappointed but gives your goat a small affectionate pat anyway. You decide to check your satchel. One delivery remains today, a simple rune stick addressed to a chieftain across the ridge. But this one's different. The message is tied with red twine, an unusual touch, and the runes are scorched into the wood, not carved. You squint trying to make sense of it, but it's not for you to understand, it's only for you to carry. Still you wonder. Historians still argue whether Viking couriers ever opened the messages they carried. Some say they were sworn to secrecy. Others suggest they were often the village gossip hubs. One rune stick found in Sweden bore the message "Dan Titel Bjorn." I read this. You may never know. Before leaving, you stop by the local cookhouse and trade a bit of beeswax for a strip of dried elk meat. The cook eyes your goat suspiciously, but relents when you promise it won't eat any benches. You're only mostly sure. You trudge out of the village around midday, following a narrow trail carved into the side of a shallow gorge. It winds along the base of a wooded hill, where the trees stand so close together, it feels like walking through a tunnel of ancient elbows. Shadows shift. Snowdrops and muffled plops from low branches. The goat walks ahead of you now, ears twitching, nose down, looking almost professional. You'd heard stories about goat messengers before, especially in the far north. They say some were trained to recognize delivery points, to follow voice commands, and even to avoid cursed rocks. You're not sure about this one? You tried to teach it to sit once, sat in your foot and refused to move for an hour. The trail bends around a boulder carved with spirals. A waymarker. You scratch the side of your nose thinking, these spirals. They're directions, kind of. The outermost loop means north. The jagged hash means danger, or possibly goats. It's all very interpretive. The wind begins to pick up again, whistling between tree trunks like a bored ghost. You lower your head and press forward. The satchel grows heavier with every step, not from weight, but from that strange unease tied to the scorched rune. It presses against your side like a secret. You try to distract yourself with the sounds. The soft crunch of snow, the flap of your cloak, the quiet jangle of a charm tied to your belt. It's a little bell carved from antler. You don't remember where you got it. Maybe a festival, maybe a lucky trade. Maybe it just showed up one day. Suddenly your goat stops, not casually, dead still, or ears up. You freeze, eyes scanning the tree line. Nothing. Then a rustle, a low grunt, and from behind a snowy bush-ant elk appears. Massive, antlered, and very unimpressed with your presence. It stares. You stare. The goat takes a step forward. Please, you think. Not today. Fortunately, the elk decides this isn't worth its time. It huffs once, turns, and vanishes into the woods with a grunt. You exhale. The goat resumes walking like nothing happened. You shake your head. This job should come with hazard pay. Eventually, the trees thin, and you find yourself approaching a long, narrow bridge built over a shallow ravine. It's old, creaky, and smells like damp rope and cold regrets. You've crossed it before, but every time you wonder if this will be the day it finally gives out. The goat doesn't hesitate. You do, but only briefly. Step by step, you cross the bridge, feeling it sway beneath you. Boards groan, wind whistles. Somewhere far below, water trickles a sound so faint it feels like a memory. The goat reaches the other side, turns and waits. You finish the crossing and step onto solid ground, legs trembling slightly. Ahead lies the chieftain's homestead, your final stop for the day. Begin the final climb. The trail to the chieftain's homestead winds up a steep, rocky slope that looks like it was designed specifically to mock your tired legs. Each step is met with a crunch of snow, a groan from your knees, and the increasingly audible wheeze of your goat. You're not sure if it's tired or just being dramatic. Possibly both. The homestead looms ahead, nestled beneath a crag of black stone that juts into the sky like a broken tooth. Smoke rises from the roof vent, curling into the pale sky. Wooden stakes line the perimeter, decorative mostly, though one does appear to have an old helmet impaled on top. You assume it's symbolic. You hope it's symbolic. You reach the gate and knock. Not with your hand. These doors are made of rough-hewn pine and reinforced with bronze studs. They bite. So instead, you grab the hanging ram's horn beside the door and give it a polite thump. It emits a sound not unlike a sleepy cow trying to sing. A moment later, the door creaks open. A woman answers. She's tall, broad-shouldered, and wearing a tunic dyed the color of rusted iron. One eye is milky with age or injury. She looks you up and down, then down at the goat, who is currently trying to lick her boot. "Message?" she asks. Voice like gravel soaked in tea. You nod and reach into your satchel. The rune stick, wrapped in red twine, is warm in your hand. That's not comforting. You pass it over without speaking. Her fingers close around it, and she gives a small nod. Adhere. She vanishes inside, closing the door with a groan that sounds suspiciously like protest. You and the goat settle on a nearby rock. It's cold. Everything is cold. But the view is oddly beautiful. Rolling hills dusted with white, clouds dragging across the sky like slow ships. And somewhere far off, the call of a raven echoing across the valley. You pull your cloak tighter and sigh. The goat curls up beside you. You let it this time. Its side is warm. It smells like regret and barn straw. 15 minutes pass, then 20. You're beginning to wonder if you've been forgotten or if you should go knock again when the door reopens. A younger man steps out. He's missing 2 fingers and looks annoyed by the fact. He doesn't speak. He just hands you a second message, wrapped the same way, scorched runes, red twined, points toward the western hills. It seems you're not done yet. You sigh through your nose and rise, stretching your back until it makes a sound like a cracking ice sheet. The goat stands, shakes itself, and immediately tries to wander in the opposite direction. No? You redirect it with a gentle tug of the tether. It grumbles but obeys. You begin the descent. This leg of the journey will take you into a region known as Merk Screwth, the dark forest. Locals say it's haunted. Historians say it's just poorly lit. You've walked it before, though not often in winter. The snow hides roots in frozen puddles that will betray your ankles at the worst moments. Still, the path is mostly clear, marked with animal skulls tied to branches in old habit meant to ward off trolls or, at the very least, discourage curious travelers. You pass beneath one now. It's a deer, bleached white by weather, its eye sockets staring down at you like it knows something you don't. Probably tax information. As the shadows deepen, you begin to hum softly, not a song with words, just a slow, repetitive tune meant to keep your nerves steady. The goat occasionally joins in with an off-key bleat. You pretend it's harmony. The trees press in, snow muffles all sound. It's the kind of silence that hums in your ears, like you're walking inside someone else's dream. Every crack of a branch or rustle of wind becomes a maybe something. You grip the strap of your satchel a little tighter. The second message feels heavier than the first. Not physically, but somehow ... denser. You wonder if the runes are cursed. Some messages are. There are old tales of carved spells disguised as innocent news, of scrolls that burned their readers' hands, or runes that whispered names at night until the recipient lost their mind. You don't believe all of them, but you don't disbelieve them either. Historians still argue whether Viking couriers were warned about the content of what they carried. Some claim they were chosen precisely because they wouldn't ask questions. Others suggest many couriers were wise women, rune readers, or scaldsfolk trusted to deliver with discretion and interpretation. You are none of those things. You are cold, tired, and about to enter a clearing that seems suspiciously too quiet. You pause at the edge of the trees. The clearing is ringed by tall, standing stones and ancient, lichen-covered monoliths arranged in a loose circle. In the center, a fire pit smolders faintly. No one is there. No footsteps in the snow. No scent of smoke. And yet the embers glow. You step forward cautiously. The goat does not follow. It freezes at the tree line, eyes wide, ears pinned back. You glance at it, then at the stones, then back. You swallow hard and approach the pit. Nothing jumps out. No voices call. But beside the fire pit sits a small stone altar weather-worn, carved with the same spiral motifs you saw earlier near the goat marker. Single animal skull rests on it. A fox, jaws open as if mid-snarl. A message has clearly been placed beneath it. This is the drop point. You remove the second rune stick from your satchel and gently slide it beneath the fox skull. As soon as your fingers leave the wood, the wind shifts. Just slightly, like someone sighing in relief. You step back, bow your head, and walk away. The goat is waiting at the edge of the trees, not chewing anything, which is possibly a record. You pat its side. It flinches. Fair enough. You rejoin the path and leave the stones behind, not looking back, even though you want to, even though you feel like they're still watching. The forest seems lighter now, as if the ancient stones absorbed all the gloom and left you with filtered snowlight and a trail that feels just a little less sinister. Your boots press into the frostbitten path, soft with pine needles and small tufts of brown grass stubbornly poking through. The goat walks close at your side, now not in loyalty, but perhaps because it also felt the shift. You don't talk about what just happened. Not to the goat, not to yourself, not to the trees. Some messages don't need retelling. After a few minutes, the scent of pine sap becomes stronger. You pass a grove where some enterprising villagers once tapped the trees for resin. You recall being told that it was used to waterproof boots and seal scrolls, though someone once tried to use it as hair oil and was mistaken for a decorative torch during a solstice feast. At the edge of the forest, you spot a crude sign carved into a flat stone, Send Dags. H. Vistu, a Treg. 3 days to Langus. If you're slow, it's an inside joke among couriers, though it's only funny when you're not already sore. You pause here, just long enough to let the goat chew on something and dig into your satchel again. The messages are delivered. The strange errand with the red twined runes is behind you. You'd expect it to feel lighter. You don't. Instead, you feel the weight of habit, the rhythm of long miles and silent hills. Being a messenger isn't about the drama. It's about the in-between. And right now, the in-between means heading toward the nearest farmstead and hoping for a roof and possibly soup. Your feet carry you down the next slope, where the wind has carved odd patterns into the snow-tiny dunes and frozen waves. The goat follows, nose twitching, tail swaying like a lazy metronome. In the distance, you spot the curl of chimney smoke. That means company. The farmstead is small, barely a longhouse, really more like a half-longhouse, with ambitions. A stone hearth juts out the front wall like a broken nose, and a curious line of boots is stacked outside, already frozen stiff. You knock gently with a stick. A middle-aged man with a wild beard and one eyebrow opens the door. He smells like smoked turnips and suspicion. Courier? He grunts. You nod. He shrugs and waves you in. Inside, the heat is immediate. The walls sweat with steam. A pot of something thick bubbles over the fire, and 6 people lounge in various stages of exhaustion. Someone's snoring in the rafters. Another person is trying to mend a sock with what appears to be a fishbone. You and the goat are given space by the fire, mostly because the goat has a reputation. You sit on a low bench and unlace your boots, releasing the unmistakable scent of overworked leather and frozen regret. No one comments. This is a judgment-free zone. A young woman ladles something from the pot into a wooden bowl and hands it to you. You nod in thanks. It's warm, salty, and possibly soup. You're not asking questions. As you eat, conversations drift past like logs on a river, mostly trade talk. One man's cousin was just sent to Dublin to barter sheep for glass beads. Another heard that someone in the far north is building a boat so big it needs 2 rivers. Most of it is exaggeration, but it helps the soup go down. Then someone mentions goat messengers. Your ears perk up mid-chew. Speaker, a hunched old woman with hands like driftwood, begins describing how, in her youth, they trained goats to carry scrolls tied to their horns. Not over long distances, but between hill villages. The trick, she says, is to feed them only after they deliver. Otherwise they get lazy, or distracted by boots, or snow, or their own hooves. Everyone chuckles. You look at your goat, blinks at you, and continues chewing your scarf. The woman goes on. She claims one goat once delivered a marriage proposal, complete with a carved ring and a song scroll. Historians still debate whether this event ever truly happened, or if it was a clever bard. A tale designed to woo audiences and justify goat ownership taxes. You set down your empty bowl and thank the cook with a nod. Your body is warmer now, looser, but sleep won't come yet. Not here. Too many feet. Too much noise. So you offer to take the night shift outside, watching for wolves, stirring the fire, keeping an eye on the weather. They accept quickly. No one likes night watch. You step outside, pulling your cloak tight. The sky is bruised with stars.
Ow.
The wind is quiet now, like a dog that's finally settled down. You find a dry log, dust off the snow, and sit. The goat lies beside you, curled like a furry comma at the end of your sentence. Your thoughts drift to the messages. 2. The scroll sealed with red twine. To the empty stone circle, and the fox skull, and the way the air felt, ... different. What was in it? A warning, a curse, a call for aid. You'll never know. But that's not your job. You are the one who carries, not the one who opens. Morning doesn't arrive all at once. It seeps in like mist beneath a door. Out the horizon blushes, a faint pink, the kind of color that might make a Viking warrior uncomfortable, if you called it what it is, delicate. The farmstead slowly stirs to life. Someone coughs in their sleep. Another mutters about fish. The fire inside the longhouse pops once and settles. You stand, brushing snow off your back and stretching your arms until your shoulders crack like old oars. The goat rises beside you, yawns wide enough to reveal its questionable breakfast from the day before, and promptly begins chewing the handle of your satchel. You gently redirect it with a stick and offer a crust of stale bread as a peace offering. The goat accepts the terms. Your body feels heavy, but it's the kind of heaviness that comes with movement, not weariness. You've slept little, but something about the cold air and quiet company of this peculiar animal leaves you feeling ... balanced. After a brief breakfast, you take your leave of the farmstead with a respectful nod and a half-joke about not stealing any goats, though, frankly. No one here would steal yours. It's got a reputation. Probably has its own saga by now. The next leg of your journey isn't for a delivery, it's to collect. Mail doesn't just go one way in the Viking world. It comes back. News, gifts, awkward apologies, and occasionally strongly worded insults written in verse. You've been asked to retrieve a carved rune stick from a neighboring village across the low valley. That's the job today. Down the slope, across the ice pond, up through the birch woods. Easy, you tell yourself. You are wrong. Halfway down the slope, your boot catches a rock buried beneath the snow. You lurch forward, pinwheeling your arms like a confused goose, and land with a grunt in a drift. The goat watches, impassive, possibly amused. You get up, dust yourself off, and pretend it never happened. The goat snorts. You consider naming it something dramatic like judgment or disappointment. It feels appropriate. By mid-morning, you reach the ice pond. It's wide, flat, and mostly froze. Emphasis on mostly. The surface glistens with a sheen of pale blue that would be beautiful if it were indeed so treacherous. You've crossed this before, many times. You know the trick? Follow the cracks. It sounds counterintuitive, but the fractures show you where the ice has been tested and survived. Smooth ice is a liar. You step carefully, your boots sliding with each shift of weight. The goat follows, hooves clicking faintly against the glassy surface. Halfway across, the wind picks up and sends a spray of powdered snow dancing across the ice in tight spirals, like spirits whispering in circles. Oh. You don't look down. Too much reflection. Makes you feel like you're walking above another world, where a second you is trapped beneath the surface, watching. Near the edge of the pond, something catches your Aja pouch frozen in the ice, just beneath the surface. You crouch down. It's old. Leather cracked. You just make out what is inside. A curled piece of bark and a small bone token carved with the rune for safe passage. You consider prying it out, but something in your spine says no. Instead, you stand and move on. The goat gives you a look and you mutter, "Don't ask." Historians still debate whether Viking couriers left messages hidden this way, emergency caches frozen into the land, to be retrieved by the next in need. Some say it was ritual, others call it coincidence. A few believe they were offerings, to gods or to the land itself. You make it across the pond with boots intact and clothes only mildly damp. The birch woods rise ahead, their white trunks like sentinels in the snow. You enter the forest and are immediately greeted by the silence unique to winter, the kind that wraps around your thoughts and makes, if you listen to things you didn't know you were thinking. The trail here is narrow and old. Moss grows on the north side of the trees, but snow makes everything ambiguous. You navigate using the tried-and-true method of "this feels about right," technique you've perfected after years of pretending you weren't lost. About an hour in, you hear voices soft echoing. The village is near. You push through the final thicket and arrive at a modest cluster of buildings tucked into the hillside, their roofs angled sharply to shed snow. Smoke curls from every chimney. Children's laughter drifts from behind a storage barn. Someone is chopping wood with a rhythm that would make a drummer jealous. You're greeted by a short man with a long beard and a missing tooth who recognizes you instantly. "Courier," he says. You nod, invites you in, and you follow him into a warm, smoky hall that smells like stewed cabbage and wolf fur. You're offered mead. You accept. You're offered dried cod. You pretend to accept, then feed it to your goat when no one's looking. They hand you the return message, a short rune stick wrapped in wool. Nothing suspicious. Nothing scorched. But tied to it is a small charm, a carved button in the shape of a raven. You raise an eyebrow. The toothless man shrugs. "For luck," he says, "or warning. Depends on who you ask." You thank him and prepare to leave. Outside, the snow begins to fall again, not heavily, just enough to remind you that the journey never really ends. You tuck the new message into your satchel, pat your goat on the head, and begin the slow walk home. Your boots leave fresh tracks. But you know they won't stay long. Not in snow like this. The snow thickens as you leave the village behind, softening the edges of the world. Trees blur into pale silhouettes, and the path ahead is barely a suggestion under the growing white. Even the goat walks more quietly now, as if it knows that every crunch is an interruption in something older and more sacred than conversation. You pull your cloak tighter, fingers stiff from the cold. The satchel hangs heavy at your side, the wool-wrapped rune stick safe inside. Every courier has their rituals. You always tap the satchel twice when the job is halfway done. You do it now. The sound is muted, but satisfying. A rhythm you can trust. As you climb the next ridge, the sky takes on a strange tone. Not dark, not bright, just ... suspended. Like the clouds are waiting for something. You reach the top and look back. The village is gone, swallowed by snow and distance. Ahead, the trail splits, one fork descends into a river valley. The other winds along the ridge toward a small, ruined watchtower. You hesitate. The valley would be safer. Shorter, too. But the river has likely iced over in ways you can't predict, and the memory of that frozen pouch still lingers. You take the ridge. The goat approves, likely because it dislikes slipping on frozen riverbanks as much as you do. The walk is slower here. Snow is deeper, the wind harsher. but the view is unmatched. For a brief moment, the clouds part just enough to reveal the sea far off, a pale gray sliver on the horizon, studded with tiny black dots, longships maybe, or whales, or very determined ducks. You descend from the ridge carefully, boots angled against the slope. Every few steps, snow sloughs away beside you, whispering as it falls into the trees below. The goat zigzags behind you, its tiny hoofs finding impossible footholds with frustrating ease. Halfway down, you pause near the remains of an old outpost, a crumbled wall, a collapsed roof, and a rusted anchor stone used to tie horses or prisoners, or possibly both. There's no one here now, just the wind, a few icicles, and a half-buried shield with faded paint. You brush snow from the shield and see a faint design, a bird in flight, not a raven, a goose. You squint. There was a unit once, the Screaming Geese, a band of loud, poorly trained fighters used mostly for distraction. No one wanted to admit if they were real. Historians still argue whether they existed or were invented by bored scalds who wanted to avoid talking about taxes. You leave the shield respectfully against the wall and move on. By mid afternoon, you're back in the lowlands. Trail flattens, trees thin, and the sound of a distant stream returns, a soft, reliable hum that soothes your thoughts. You find a familiar boulder, marked with a single rune, Heimerholm. You're close now. You decide to stop here for a brief rest. You sit on the boulder and unwrap a small parcel of dried berries and smoked meat from your pouch. The goat eyes the meat, but you give it a few berries instead. It accepts this compromise. As you eat, you notice something odd in the snow nearby. A line of small prints, not human, not quite animal either. It's too small for deer, too precise for hares. They follow the path for several meters, then vanish into the underbrush. You frown. You've seen similar tracks before, once in a village where the elders spoke of the hidden people, spirits of the land, sometimes kind, sometimes curious. You offer the last of your berries to the snow where the tracks vanish, just in case. The goat rolls its eyes. Or maybe that's just your imagination. You rise and continue onward. The final stretch is familiar pine needles underfoot, the smell of distant fires. A trail of broken fence posts leading toward the edge of the settlement. Children's laughter echoes faintly in the wind. The goat perks up at the sound, tail wagging. Soon, rooftops emerge from the Hosier home outpost. Nothing grand. Just a ring of cabins, a few sheds, a central fire pit, and the scent of turnips that someone insists are delicious despite all available evidence. You step into the square and are greeted with a few raised eyebrows and nods of recognition. No applause, no feast. Just familiarity. You hand the wool-wrapped rune stick to the quartermaster, a woman with a voice like cracked leather and a nose broken in 3 places. She nods once, tucks it into her ledger bag, and mutters, "Still warm?" You're not sure what she means. You head to your bunkhouse, goat in tow. Inside, it's blissfully warm. The fire crackles. A pile of clean straw waits in the corner. The goat makes a beeline for it and collapses like a dramatic bard finishing a sad song. You ease onto your cot, boots still on. The journey is done. For today, the cot creaks gently beneath you as your muscles settle into the familiar ache of a long route completed. Your boots are caked with salt crust and pine tar. One of your socks has developed a hole the size of a walnut. You tell yourself you'll fix it later. You won't. Across the room, The goat has already made itself too comfortable, sprawled on the straw with one hoof sticking in the air, snoring faintly like a tiny winded blacksmith. You consider telling it to move. You also consider moving yourself. In the end, neither of you does anything. The warmth of the hearth spreads lazily through the room, dragging your thoughts into that strange space between waking and dreaming. Your head leans back, your eyes close for a second, which is, of course, exactly when the door opens. Cold air floods in. A figure steps into the dim light. A boy no older than 12. Eyes wide, nose red, breath puffing from his mouth in little clouds. He doesn't speak, just holds out a small piece of bark, wrapped tightly with rough twine. You blink. Sit up. Take it. The bark is marked with a hastily scratched rune. Sfera answer. You nod to the boy, who bolts back into the snow like he's fleeing an avalanche. You close the door and turn the bark over in your hands. Small, light, but answers carry more weight than questions. You don't open it, of course. It's not yours. But the name scratched on the back is, and it's one you haven't seen in months. Anna. She was a fellow courier once. Quick, clever, fond of eating snow and swearing at ravens. She vanished near the border last spring during a particularly bad storm. Most assumed she'd gone south, or worse. But this changes things. Pack quickly. You're not told where to go, but you know. There's only one route that made sense for this kind of message. The coastal ridge path where the wind sings. So high it whistles through your bones, and the cliffs edge toward the sea like they're tired of standing. It's not an easy path. It's not a short one. You whistle low, and the goat lifts its head with a groggy bleat. You toss it a piece of dried apple, catches it midair and chews slowly, judging you. Then it stands. Within half an hour, you're back on the trail. This time there's no satchel. It's just the bark message tied to your belt, your cloak pulled tight, and the goat trailing behind with suspicious enthusiasm. You walk fast. The path out of the village cuts through a grove of elder trees, their trunks twisted like dancers caught mid-spin. You run a hand across one as you pass. The bark is warm, somehow unrough like old hands. There's moss here, green even in winter, and somewhere overhead a bird sings a few uncertain notes, like it's forgotten the melody. Once you reach the base of the coastal ridge, the terrain changes sharply. The snow thins, replaced by salt-frosted grass and crumbling stone paths. You can smell the sea now, that mix of brine, wind, and something alive and ancient. It clears your head. Halfway up, you pass a boundary cairn, a pile of stones, marked with bones and bits of rusted chain. It's a territorial marker. Not for people. For the old things. Things that don't care much for bark scrolls or goat messengers. You leave a small offering, a coin stamped with a hammer, something you've carried for years and never spent. Historians still argue whether these cairns were truly functional or just symbolic. Some say they marked sacred borders. Others believe they were warning signs for wanderers. A few suggest they were simply where people put things they didn't want to carry anymore, and then got superstitious about it afterward. You climb on. By late afternoon, the sky begins its slow collapse into dusk. The sun barely lifts itself above the sea now, casting long golden shadows across the rocks. You find the spot Anna once called her air throne, a flat boulder on the edge of a cliff, where the wind wraps around you like a living thing. She used to sit here for hours, just ... watching. You sit for a moment, too. And there, tucked beneath a rock, is the matching scroll. Same bark, same twine. A reply? You don't touch it. You just sit there, the sea roaring softly beneath you, the goat chewing a patch of seaweed nearby with intense concentration. The message is gone, and yet it isn't. The wind carries something familiar now, like a voice just out of hearing, or a footstep that never lands. You lean back and close your eyes. Maybe she made it. Maybe she's watching. Or maybe the ridge remembers everyone who's ever carried something sacred across it. You stand, gently place the new scroll in your pouch, and begin the walk back down. Behind you, the goat lets out a single loud bleat. You don't know what it means, but it sounds like goodbye. The descent from the coastal ridge is slower than you'd like, but you've learned not to rush it. The path coils like an old rope left out in the rain, slippery, tangled, and unwilling to cooperate. Every step is measured, your boots pressing carefully into the gritty frost that coats the stone. The wind has quieted. Not completely, but enough that the silence feels more ... present. Like something waiting beside you rather than chasing from behind. The goat walks close, nose twitching at every sea-salted gust. It seems unusually alert, even for a creature whose daily routine involves yelling at wind and chewing fence posts. By the time you reach the tree line again, the light is low and golden, kind that makes everything look older and softer. You pass a stand of fir trees and notice something unusual: small bits of cloth tied to the branches. Prayer knots. Some faded, some new. Each one carries a hope, or a worry, or a secret. A thread for the gods to follow. You pause, untie a small strand from your own satchela, frayed piece of red woolen, gently tie it beside the others. No words, just the act. Historians still debate the origins of this tradition. Some claim it comes from the people. Others say it predates the Norse entirely. What's agreed upon is this: when you tie something to the tree, you're asking someone to remember what you're carrying, even if it isn't heavy. The goat doesn't pause for the ritual. It is instead preoccupied with licking sap off a low branch and getting it stuck in its beard. You let it sort that out on its own. Back on the main trail, you settle into the rhythm of the road once more. Left, right, crunch, sigh. You begin to hum again an old courier tune. No lyrics, just that looping melody, somewhere between a lullaby and a marching song. The kind of tune that gets stuck in your head and walks with you, even when you're alone. You think again about the message you retrieved. The second bark scroll. It still rests in your satchel, warm against your side despite the cold. You haven't opened it, you won't. But your fingers keep finding it, checking that it's still there. Something about it feels unfinished. Like a reply is waiting to be written, but no one knows the right language. The trail brings you past an abandoned shepherd's hut. The roof is sagging inward, the door hanging by one hinge. Moss creeps up the sides like it's trying to reclaim the place. Inside, you can just make out the skeleton of a loom and a broken stool. You pause in front of the doorway, out of habit more than curiosity. Carved above the lintel, almost invisible under the frost, is a message in runes. Velkommen heim and kom du me sannoliken. Welcome home, but bring the truth. You smile faintly. It's probably a joke. Or a warning. Or both. You keep walking. By dusk, the snow begins again, light, dry and swirling like ash. It coats your shoulders, dusts your goat's back, gathers in the folds of your cloak. It brings with it a stillness, as if the world is holding its breath. You reach a fork in the path. To the left, the straight route back to the village well-trodden, safe, to the right. A detour through the elder grove and across a long-forgotten bridge that may or may not still exist. The goat sniffs both paths and turns right. You sigh, you follow. The elder grove is beautiful at twilight. The branches tangle overhead, forming a kind of tunnel, and the snow catches in their limbs like stars tangled in cobwebs. Every step echoes faintly. You think about the stories your grandmother used to tell about trees that remember names and whisper them back in dreams. You reach the bridge. It's still there. Barely. The ropes are frayed, the planks bowed, but it's passable if you're careful. You take a breath and step onto it. It creaks, but doesn't break. The goat crosses without hesitation. You follow, focusing on the horizon and not the shifting water far below. Halfway across, the wind picks up again soft, steady, and filled with the scent of salt and wood smoke. You think again of Anna, of the scrolls, of the names etched into memory but never spoken aloud. And you wonder how many other couriers have walked this same path, scrolls tied tight, unsure of who they're really delivering for. You make it across. On the other side, the trail joins the main road once again, familiar, muddy, comforting, in the way only deeply rutted roads can be. The sky is a deep gray now. It's the kind that promises stars if the clouds part, but doesn't commit. You push on, satchel full, thoughts quiet. Home is not far. You can feel it in your knees. You can hear it in the goat's steps. And for the first time in hours, you let yourself believe the night might end without another strange message. Your village appears through the trees not like a place, but like a memory dimly lit, softened by smoke and frost, the outlines of rooftops melting into the twilight. The sky above it is the softest violet, one that never quite exists in full daylight or full night. It's the shade of almost home. As you approach, the smell of peat fires and drying fish welcomes you. You pass the first fence, a lazy affair of half-buried stakes, and string ends step back into familiar territory. You hear someone calling a name you don't recognize, then laughter. A dog barks once, decides it wasn't worth the effort, and stops. Your goat trots ahead like it owns the place. It probably does. Few children run past, one of them pointing at your companion and saying, "That's the demon goat again." You don't correct him. Make your way toward the mail house along. Low building with a thatched roof and a carved wooden plaque above the door that reads, "If you're rereading this, you're late." Inside, it's warm, dark, and smells like wet wool and old parchment. The quartermaster is still there, hunched over a pile of rune sticks and bark notes, muttering about ink quality and too many vowels. You place the second message, the one from the coastal ridge, gently on the sorting table. She doesn't even look up. Just says, "Did she write anything dumb in it?" You blink. You know who it's from? "Oh, please," she scoffs. No one else ties raven charms to their bark. She's always been dramatic, even when she's silent. You almost smile. No. She sets the rune stick aside, very deliberately. "This one goes to the archive," she says. Not the fire. Not the shelf. The archive. You raise an eyebrow. No one uses the archive. Not unless the message is too dangerous to open, or too sacred to forget. Historians still argue whether Viking mail archives were literal vaults or more metaphorical places in the mind, or the village memory, where messages lived long after the senders were gone. Some claim bones were used to bind certain secrets. Others insist the archive is just a myth to keep curious children away from the scroll shelves. You say nothing? Instead, you retreat to the back of the mail house, where your little bunk space waits curtained off, low to the ground. full of the kinds of smells you've long stopped noticing. The goat follows, makes a nest out of your spare cloak, and begins chewing on your pillow. You allow it. You're too tired to argue. You lie down, just for a moment, just to let the quiet settle in. But your mind, as always, is still walking. Ak! You begin to think about the goats again, about their role, not just as companions, but as literal male animals. Most people imagine ravens, or sleek horses with flaring nostrils, or even stealthy dogs. But goats? Oh yes, they were smart, agile, and fiercely loyal if properly bribed. You remember hearing tales of a village where goat messengers wore small armor made of wood and padded moss, not for war, of course, but for ceremony. The goats would trot into the square, their little horns painted, their sides carrying bark messages that announced births, weddings, trade victories. People would gather and cheer, offer berries, take oaths. You'd never seen it yourself, but the idea stayed with you. The goat snorts, as if aware it's being idealized. It's currently attempting to eat a candle stub. You take the candle away. It glares at you. You ignore it. Outside, someone rings the night bell. 3 long tones. Courier incoming. You roll onto your side and sigh into your pillow. The world never really sleeps. Even the most boring messages have urgency to someone. Your door curtain rustles. Message for you, someone whispers. You sit up. I'm off duty. It's personal. You pause. That changes things. You stand and meet the figure at the curtain. Young boy, no more than 10, cheeks wind-burned and eyes too tired for his age. He hands you a small folded square of birch bark, tied with green twine. No charm, no rune stick. Just a line scratched into the back. They remember the goat. You blink. The boy shrugs. That's all they said. No sender. No return path. He leaves. Before you can ask more, you stare at the message for a long time. You don't open it. Not yet. Instead, you sit on the edge of your cot and glance over at the goat. It's fast asleep, snoring gently, its hooves twitching like it's dreaming of outrunning chickens. You wonder, not for the first time, just how many places you've been together, how many messages this strange creature has witnessed, how many secrets it has accidentally chewed. Outside, the wind rises again. The night leans in, and the birch message stays unopened in your hand, for now. You don't sleep, not fully. You drift, half submerged in that warm, murky lake between wakefulness and dreams, where thoughts float without form and time stops meaning anything. But beneath it all, your hand stays curled around the birch bark. They remember the goat. Simple, strange, vague enough to be nonsense, but also ... not. At first light, you're already up. The goat is drooling on your boot. You gently nudge it awake. It yawns like it hasn't slept in weeks and rises with the air of someone who believes breakfast should have arrived already. You skip breakfast, tie your cloak, slide the birch bark into your sleeve, and without asking for permission or instructions, you leave the village. It's sometimes you just know. Your feet follow the east road, an old track, rarely used except by people who remember why it matters. It winds past the edge of the forest, over a stream with a broken mill wheel, and through a glade of yew trees that creak even when there's no wind. The path narrows as you go. Eventually, it vanishes altogether. But you keep walking. The goat keeps following. You don't need signs now. You're following memory, not yours, someone else's. Eventually, you reach a clearing. At its center, a mossy, half-collapsed circle of stones. It's old, older than anything built for practical use. This isn't a home. It isn't a burial site. It's a place. The goat trots forward, circles the stones once, then stops beside a weathered slab etched with a symbol you can't quite read. Maybe a tree, maybe a goat with wings, maybe both. You sit. The morning is quiet, save for birds, wind, and the occasional distant crack of melting frost. You pull the birch bark from your sleeve, and after a long breath, untie the green twine. Inside, the words are few. The goats that carried messages across the fjords once wore bells carved from ice. They rang for silence. You stare at it, unsure whether it's a riddle, a memory, or both. Historians still debate whether such things ever happened. Goats wearing ice bells? It seems unlikely. But then again, so does the idea of a continent-spanning network of couriers who trusted small animals with life-altering information, and yet there you are, with a goat in a forgotten stone circle, reading something that feels like it wasn't written for you, but was meant for you anyway. You lean back against a stone and let your thoughts wander. The goats were a joke to outsiders, you remember. But not here. Here, they were respected, revered, even. Not just for their hardiness or stubbornness, but for something older, something tied to myth. There's one you've heard, that goats were sacred messengers of the trickster god Loki, chosen not for their nobility, but for their unpredictability. Because messages should always arrive, yes, but not always as expected. You glance at your goat. It is now attempting to headbutt a tree stump for no reason other than sheer personality. Yes, that tracks. You reach into your satchel and, without thinking, take out the old raven-charmed message, the one that belonged to Anna. You hold it for a moment. Then you place it gently at the base of the carved stone. Not buried, not burned, just left. There are some messages you don't carry forever. You let out a slow breath. Your goat sneezes and startles a bird into the sky. You watch it fly off, small, dark, and vanishing into the brightening blue. The wind shifts. For a moment, it sounds like bells, tiny ones, made of ice, and then it's gone. You stand, stretch, and nudge the goat back onto the path. It obeys, begrudgingly, pausing only to chew one of the birch scroll's green threads before you slap it away. The walk back is easier. The weight is different. Not lighter, just ... balanced. You find yourself humming again. That same tune, but slower, gentler, and this time the goat hums along, sort of. The snow begins again before you reach the edge of the forest. It's not a heavy fall, just a slow drifting of soft flakes that seem more decorative than practical. They don't stick, they float. They catch in your hair and eyelashes, making you blink like a confused owl as you trudge forward. The goat doesn't care. It's chewing a pine cone. You're starting to think it might be immortal. The return path winds lower now, through a long grove of spruce where the branches hang like heavy curtains. You brush past them, hearing their faint creaking protest as if the trees are gossiping about your intrusion. You make a mental note to leave an offering on your way back through. As you round a bend in the path, something new emerges, a figure ahead. Hunched, bundled in gray furs, standing beside a sled packed with kindling and wrapped scrolls. You recognize them immediately. It's an elder courier. Retired, technically, but no one really retires from this work. They just slow down enough to become legend. You approach slowly, the goat respectfully keeping its distance. Even it knows better than to chew boots. Thought you'd pass this way, mutters without turning. Their voice is like stone dragged across gravel. Stones remembered your steps. You nod. That's the only acceptable answer. It turns now. Weathered face framed by frost and quiet eyes that look at you like they still reading your message, even though you haven't said a word. You've carried strange things, says things not always meant for people. You say nothing. It's not a question, continues. The messages that bind a village or break a curse, they don't always arrive in words. Sometimes they come in a goat's shadow or a silence that takes 3 days to explain. You offer the raven-charmed message. Dose and tea take it. They just glance at the place where it used to be, now buried beneath snow and memory. That one's already gone, they say. You nod again. Kari steps aside and gestures to the sled. Trade you blink? For what? For the story, they say. I'll take your steps. Take mine. You look at the sled, nothing fancy. Just bundles of dried bark, small scrolls, a half-eaten loaf of rye bread, and a single stone carved with the rune silence. You reach for the handle. The goat climbs in without asking, grins. You begin walking once more, now pulling the sled, its wooden runners humming softly against the packed trail. It's heavier than it looks. Not the kind of weight that makes your arms ache, but the kind that settles in your chest and makes you walk slower, more thoughtfully. Like the stories on this sled might spill if jostled too much. The trail dips again, winding past a frozen creek. You pause to look at the water, a thin glass pane over a bed of smooth stones. Beneath the surface, bubbles are trapped mid-rise, like the creek itself paused to listen. You glance at one scroll on the sled. It has no writing, just a drawing, 3 goats standing on a mountain. Each with something different on its back. A child, a torch, and a fish. You don't ask? There are some messages you're meant to carry without understanding. Historians still argue whether Viking couriers were allowed to open the messages they carried. Some records suggest harsh penalties. Others imply a trusted few were expected to read them in order to pass judgment on their urgency. A few tales often whispered late at night say the most sacred messages were never written down at all, only passed from courier to courier by memory, humming, or dreams. You walk on, the sled tracking neatly behind you, your goat chewing the bread it has somehow stolen from the supplies. As the sun dips behind the trees, you hear it again, that strange, delicate sound like bells made of frost. It's coming from ahead. You quicken your step. The trail opens into a hollow surrounded by old trees and ringed with stones. Another circle, but different from the last. As one hums. Not literally. But the silence here has weight, like a drum waiting to be struck. You stop in the center, let the stillness settle, and place the sled down gently. A breeze moves through the hollow, brushing the snow into low spirals. Then stillness. No birds, no footsteps, just breath and space and waiting. You turn back the way you came. Empty-handed now, lighter, freer. The goat walks beside you, unusually quiet, as if it knows something important happened, but Dose and Tea want to ruin the moment by acknowledging it. The wind brushes past again, like a voice with no words, and you walk into it. You take the long way home. It's just that after leaving something behind, something you didn't fully understand, it carried anyway. It feels wrong to walk the shortest route. The forest seems to agree. The trees open wider now, the snow shallower, the sky lighter, even though the sun has nearly vanished. The goat still trails you, silent but present, doesn't ask where you're going. Of course it never did. And maybe that S the best companion for a courier. Not because it obeys, but because it doesn't need a reason. You reach the stream again, but something's changed. The water, which had frozen stiff just a day ago, now trickles softly through cracks in the ice. Not much. Just enough to murmur. Just enough to speak. You kneel beside it. Dip your fingers into the chill and touch the smooth stones beneath. The water is cold, but it wakes you. And you remember something a dawn-old tale told by the village's oldest woman. Her teeth like weathered stone and her eyes always half-closed as though she were halfway to becoming mist herself. She used to say that the gods once sent goats to collect sound. That's right sound. Not gold, not prayers, not even souls. Just sounds too lovely or too painful to leave lying around. A baby's first laugh. The sigh of a ship leaving harbor. The scream of a mother during childbirth. The goats would carry these sounds in little jars, strapped to their sides, sealed with beeswax, and spells, and store them deep in the earth, so the world wouldn't grow too loud or too quiet. Historians, of course, dismiss this as poetic nonsense, but some of them, usually the ones who've spent too many nights alone on these roads, admit they've heard strange echoes in the woods. Snatches of lullabies, whispers without speakers. You stand again, and just as you do, the goat lets out a single, soft bleat. The sound echoes not far, but deep. You turn. The snow behind you, previously untouched, now bears a trail of small hoof prints. Not the goat's, smaller, more delicate. Each print perfectly pressed, leading away from the stream and into the dark of the pines. You hesitate. Follow. The goat does not protest. The path winds unexpectedly, past knotted roots and thorned branches that seem to move out of your way. You find yourself stepping softer now, like you've entered someone's home uninvited. The air here is thicker. Not cold, just still. You find them near a fallen tree. 3 stones, arranged in a triangle. At their center, a bundle of moss wrapped with twine, humming softly. Literally humming. You can hear it a low vibration, almost like a sigh wrapped in music. You don't touch it. You just sit. Because what else do you do when the forest offers you something it's hidden for 1,000 years? You stay quiet. You listen. The sound inside the moss isn't a voice. Not exactly, but it feels familiar. It feels like a memory you never made. You think of Anna, you think of the hundreds of footsteps you've left on trails like this Siege, one slightly different, each one connecting places and people who may never meet except through the silence you carried between them. You stay for what might be an hour or a minute. And then you rise, bow once to the stones, and walk back the way you came. The hoof prints are gone. The silence follows you. Not the heavy kind. The good kind. The kind that feels like the pause just before a story begins. You return to the village just as the first lanterns are being lit, amber light spilling across doorways, flickering on wooden beams and melting the edges of shadows. The smoke from cooking fires rises in soft plumes, curling into the dusk like the breath of a sleepy dragon. It smells like turnips again. Someone is always boiling turnips. No one knows why. You walk slower than usual, not because you're tired, though. You are but because you're full. Not with food or drink, but with something less defined. Like a story you've heard but haven't told yet. like the weight of a message that you're still carrying long after the scroll has been delivered. The goat walks beside you, matching your pace. It steps softer than usual. Perhaps it feels it too, that strange quiet that trails after certain moments. Not grief, not joy, just ... knowing. You stop near the center of the square. There's a bench carved from a single beam of driftwood, warped and polished by weather, and you sit down slowly. From here you can see the whole village, the snow-covered roofs, the distant shape of the fjord, the children playing quietly by the ash trees. You reach into your satchel and feel the green twine from the birch bark, now crumpled and soft. You don't need the message anymore. You've memorized every word. You keep the twine. You tie it around your wrist, not for luck, for remembrance. Somewhere nearby, a bard is humming an old tune. It's out of tune. The lyrics are half forgotten, but the rhythm is familiar. It loops like a message on a long journey, repeating just enough to find its way home. The quartermaster approaches you, arms crossed, brow raised. "Heard you walk the ridge," she says. You nod, in the elder path, in the archive hollow. Another nod. She sighs, sitting beside you without invitation. That goat's going to be insufferable now. You've turned it into a legend. You glance over. The goat is currently standing on top of a barrel, surveying the village like a proud general, majestically. You both laugh. Quietly. She doesn't ask what you found. And you don't offer. Instead, she pulls a flask from her belt, uncorks it, and hands it to you. It smells like fermented apples and regret. Take a sip. It burns gently, like good memories. "I used to walk those routes too," she murmurs, "long before I was this." She gestures vaguely to her weathered self. "Back when I thought silence was just something you filled with noise." You glance at her. She continues, voice softer now. "But then I realized some silences are sacred. They're not empty. They single quotes, storage. Because you've started to feel that too. Silence isn't always absence. Sometimes it's where the stories live before they're ready." You sit together for a while, watching the night arrive, not abruptly, but like a tide easing over the village, painting everything in silver and blue. The stars begin to flicker overhead. The wind is gentle tonight, barely more than a breath. Eventually, she stands. "I won't assign you a route tomorrow," she says. You raise an eyebrow. "You've earned a day to wander," she adds, "or to sleep." You thank her with a nod. And then you sit alone again, listening to the quiet. The goat jumps off the barrel and plops itself beside your bench. It rests its head on your boot. You look up at the stars, and in that silence you think of all the things you've carried. The runed sticks, the scrolls, the questions with no answers, the names written in bark, the silence of sacred places, the footsteps no one remembers but the trail, of course the goat. You lean back against the bench, exhale slowly, and feel something shift inside you, not break, not crack, just ... open. That night, you dream of hoofbeats. Not loud, not urgent, it's just the steady rhythm of something sure-footed and persistent, climbing a path that never ends but never turns back. In the dream, the world is soft and blue. The snow is warm somehow, and the sky hangs close enough to touch. You walk beside the goat, who now wears a crown of woven moss and carries a scroll too large for its size, yet too light to notice. You don't speak. You don't need to. Somewhere ahead, the road hums like it's singing a lullaby you used to know. You wake slowly, like floating upward through water. The room is still. The fire's embers glow faintly. Outside, the village hasn't yet begun to stir. The goat snores beside your bed, curled in a ball, its beard twitching as though it's arguing with someone in its dreams. You smile, then you rise. You take your time dressing, wrap your cloak tight, lace your boots with patience. The mail house is quiet when you step in only, the faint creak of beams and the soft rustle of parchment being sorted. The quartermaster nods at you from her desk. No words, just understanding. There's no route for you today. So you wander. You visit the smith, who's polishing a brooch shaped like a goat's horn. You stop by the weavers, who's tying tiny silver bells onto the fringe of a ceremonial scarf. At the bakery, someone's baked a loaf shaped like a hoof. You buy it. You don't ask why. You sit on your usual bench and share it with the goat. It eats the horn. You eat the rest. You watch the village live. No scrolls, no messages. It's just the quiet motion of a place that remembers its messengers, and perhaps in its own way, the goat. That evening, as dusk returns with its soft cloak of blue, someone leaves a small package by your door. Inside, a fresh length of green twine, a birch shaving shaped like a bell, and a carved charm of a goat mid-lip. No note. No signature, but you understand. It's not for sending. It's for keeping. The night is kind, the wind is low. The stars blink like old friends. You lie back in your cot and let the stillness settle in. And for the first time in a long time, you don't feel like something is waiting. Because tonight, everything has already arrived. Wind down, and now, as the final flakes of snow settle on the eaves, and the fire crackles low behind closed shutters, let your breath ease into something slower, softer. The goat snores again, not loudly. Just enough to remind you that the world continues even when you're still. You've traveled far tonight. Across ridges and hollows, past trees that whisper, and streams that remember your steps. You've carried silence wrapped in birch bark, listened to wind chimes made of frost, shared a bench with someone who understands the weight of words never spoken aloud. You've let go of messages that weren't yours to keep, and in return, you've been offered something quieter, not sleep, exactly, but something gentler than wakefulness. A space between. The kind of space where ancient goats, where bells that ring for silence, where footsteps mean more than destinations. Where your name is not a burden, but a rhythm in the trail behind you. So now there's nothing left to carry. You've done enough. Let the path continue without you for tonight. Let the village hold itself, and the snow fall where it may. You're safe here. The goat will keep watch. And the stars, old and blinking, will sing lullabies in a language too ancient to trouble your thoughts. Close your eyes, unclench your hands. The world remembers. And now, it can rest too. And before you drift all the way into sleep, just a quiet thank you from me to you for sharing this moment, for letting your mind wander through the soft folds of ancient history. If this story helped you relax, unwind, or simply forget the day for a little while, I'd be so grateful if you hit that subscribe button, not out of habit only, if it truly brought you peace. Wishing you the gentlest dreams. And I'll see you again soon, right here. Good night.